mentioned this piece before, but there was this one piece that I saw in Spain somewhere. I don't remember the artist. I don't remember the name of the piece. I'm sorry, but basically it was a round room filled with tons of these little drawings of grids with like different colored squares. And the explanation of the piece was at the end of this like circle. And so I was looking around, I was like, all right, colored squares, give me a break, you know? And then I went to read the little thing, and it was this guy who every day he would go out into his garden and he would make a little grid of the colors that he saw in his garden. And so it would like change through the seasons. And I'm like, that's so cute. And also, it's a really cool kind of way to see the representation of how the colors of the foliage and the plants, you know, change throughout the seasons in a different and creative way.
Well, and what a beautiful like visual representation of time too, right? That like this is literally a visual representation of what this one little piece of the world does throughout time. It's like, that's really cool, and you get to see it all at once in one like instantiated experience of it. You know, that's actually so interesting too, that it's like there are certain pieces that I am like, I just see and I'm captivated by it. It's like, oh, I don't need to know any other information about it. I love it. But then there's some pieces that I'll learn the background of, and I'm like, if I had just seen it, I wouldn't have given two shits.
Exactly.
But then it's like you learn something about it and it's like, okay, now I'm obsessed with this.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting how that works sometimes. Especially with more like abstract art. I feel like that's usually my experience with seeing and learning about abstract art. Most of the time, I'm not particularly captivated by it just by how it looks. Mm-hmm. But sometimes in learning about the creation of the piece, the mediums that were used and stuff, I'm like, oh, that just became a whole lot cooler. Yeah. But well, I'm trying to think of how that might translate to poetry, but you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, why do you think that is? I think for me, I tend to have a like predisposition to wanting everything to have this deeper meaning, and like I really like knowing that something has like layered meaning and someone's thought about it in all of these different specific ways. But again, then I kind of, like I was talking about a little bit ago, question like, why do I need something to have all of these layered meanings, right? Like, isn't just like something created for creation's sake still a worthwhile piece of art? And like, why does the layered meaning feel more justified in an artful process? And to me, I think that's how I relate it back to poetry, right? I was actually just having a conversation with my parents like 3 days ago about Rupi Kaur, and no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade, don't like her poetry.
I don't
think it's poetry. And I think just about anyone who actually, which even in me saying this, I'm like fully aware of how like privileging I am. I'm so privileging like the Western academic structure of what I think poetry is and the history of words and the art form. And it's like, who am I to say that these are stupid poems, right? But it's like, to me, I'm like, it's not poetry. Like, sorry, you don't get to just...
I'm not the biggest fan either.
Right, and it's like, but then again, it's like, why, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. Like, I get to think that, and I think I'm valid in thinking that. But at the same time, it's like, if other people get something out of that, that's fine. You're allowed to get something out of it. But there is something that deeply frustrates me about it literally. Like, I think the poem, I pulled one up because I was like, when I was talking to my parents about it, because I was like, I need you to just hear how ridiculous it is. And it's like, there is a difference between being alone and lonely. And I'm like, that's not a poem. But then it's like, but could it be? And what's the definition of poem? And why does that make me so mad? And is it just because it's easy and I have this tie to wanting something to be layered and effortful? And
this
like, what's the validity of of a certain poem, right? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I have quite a few notes on that. And I think this is super interesting because I agree with you there, but at the same time, I do write a lot of very short poems, and they don't necessarily require, like, I didn't put a lot of time or effort into them. And with those poems, especially, editing them, revising them feels wrong and feels
Mm.
inauthentic in a way because with those, I don't know, for some reason I'm more likely to, like, with a short piece that I've written, feel like editing it just takes away from the
Like
vibe that it has.
the spontaneity of what you
Yeah, yeah,
captured. Yeah.
exactly. But I don't know, I kind of want to make a little bit of a comparison here because to like visual art and
Yeah.
like with short poems and sort of the depth of analysis that um you can do with those as a reader. Like with like when you were saying that, I was thinking like, oh, like T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. You
Yes.
could overanalyze that poem for your entire lifetime, and
Yeah.
every time you read it, you can find a new meaning and or like a new reference, a new allusion
Oh
to
yeah.
it. And I love that type of poetry for that reason. Same with
Yeah.
Allen Ginsberg, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's it's so dense, and that's part of the magic of it is
Right.
that it's a constant like revealing a constant like unconcealing of these different
Yeah.
layers of meaning that really go beyond just the words themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that longer poems are more likely to achieve, that type
Yes.
of analysis, than like a three-line poem.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe there might be a comparison here to visual art because the piece that I'm working on right now, it's another door. It's blue. It's pretty fun so far. I'm enjoying it. But I was really intentional about the first layer this time. Usually I work in like adding layers of detail, but
Mm-hmm.
this time I was like I'm gonna get the first layer as close to what I want it to look like as possible, and then do more like semi-translucent layers on top, like glazes, lots
Mm.
of glazes where you basically you mix the paint in some sort of solvent or like whatever it's called, medium. I don't know.
Sure,
I don't know,
sure.
but it makes the paint more translucent, and so you can add lots of layers, and that gives the painting an appearance or illusion of depth that just one opaque layer wouldn't accomplish. And actually, because of the way that light hits it, you know, because if you have
Oh
lots of
yeah.
little semi-translucent layers, the light goes like pew, 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 and then like shoots into your eye,
Right.
right? Versus one opaque layer, is just like bow, just one.
Right. There's just that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that makes
Whereas,
sense.
yeah, with all the layers, the particles have to like, you know, so it creates like a more like this illusion of depth that a single layer
Yeah.
can't achieve. And so I've been doing a lot of glazes on it, and it's really frustrating because I'm like, well, it looked fine before, but I know that if I just keep going and doing these very small incremental changes and these little layers one after the other, then it will become something that it couldn't possibly be if I just left it
Right.
at one layer. Even though it looked good at the one layer, and I could have stopped there. And there are times when I'm like, I wish I stopped there. um, you know? But I'm wondering if maybe there's a comparison there to poetry with like,
Yeah.
and even with a longer piece, there could be a sense where like a longer poem could equate to one opaque layer of paint, you know, if you don't
Yeah.
like do these incremental changes and revisions. But I'm wondering if you can have a short poem that can achieve that level of depth.
Yeah. One thing that occurred to me as you were talking is like the idea of like the unveiling, the unconcealing that these I think The Wasteland is a perfect example of this kind of poem that we're talking about, right? That a poem like that allows that it's almost like the work of the different iterations is baked into the poem.
Yeah.
And so when you're going through it, it's like you can almost feel like you're slogging through the creative process with the poet. Whereas I think maybe shorter poems, there is something to the like, isn't the work like of creating that kind of poem, which I will say, and maybe I'm just like way hating on Rupi Kaur, and I'm just being a hater. Maybe I'm on my hater mode today, but
That's fine.
I do think there's a difference between short poems, right? And that really successful short poems, I think there is a sense in which it's like there's this feeling of I trust that the poet, like I can feel the slog that the poet went through to create something that me as a reader doesn't have to experience alongside the poet. I'm almost only seeing the finished product, whereas something like The Wasteland, it's like showing your work, kind of.
Yeah, like
Does
the
that make
reader
sense?
no, that's a really good. I like that a lot because like with The Wasteland, I'm sure there was a lot of drafts of it.
Right,
And
right.
and the reader like in writing the poem that way, it kind of transfers that iterative process over to the reader where they
Yes.
have to also kind of go through it time and time again and reanalyze it and that and then like maybe some short poems the author takes on that difficult iterative process so that the reader doesn't have to, but maybe others there aren't because when I write short poems it's just like most of the time it's just a one and done thing.
Yeah,
I
right.
wish
Well,
maybe I
and
should
I,
try to find an example
but I do think I would love an example, but I
because I've
think
been trying to
too,
update my poetry, my little typed up poetry thing
I
I was
love it.
working on earlier.
But I do think there's something about like even using you as an example with short poems, like even if you don't, like you said a little bit earlier, you don't really edit or revise these short poems, but there is something in like you having lived life that is the iterative process of that poem.
Oh,
Does
yeah,
that make sense? That it's
I like
like,
that.
even if you're not like sitting down and like baking it into that, it's like you've kind of done it already. And this piece that's coming out spontaneously is the reflection of all of these. It's like a different way to poem, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that that process is something that I have a different level of trust in different creators and artists with, but at the same time, and I think this speaks to what we were talking about a few weeks ago when you came to visit too, that like for some paintings it could sing to you even if it didn't sing to the artist, right? That it's
Right,
like
yeah.
that's interesting. But it's like it is Rupi Kaur actually creating something really powerful in like maybe she has some deeper meta commentary around poetry that she is doing through all of this that I'm just not aware of, right?
Yeah.
That is doing something here, but that it's like having there is some relationship with the artist that I think arises in not being able to see the work. Does that make sense?
There, could you repeat that last sentence?
Yeah, like I think there's a specific relationship of trust that the artist asks for in not showing you the work, if that makes sense. Like I think William Carlos Williams is asking the viewer to like believe his poesis without showing the wasteland that maybe was created. I don't know if I agree with that,
It's
but
interesting.
there's
I've never thought of it that way before. Like this idea that in certain artworks, like appreciating them requires trusting the artist in a way. That's, I've never thought of it that way before.
and I
Um,
think even in that I'm still privileging the like hard work thing. So
a little bit,
there's some
yeah.
flaws in that too.
But I'm
But
thinking with, let me see. I forget how to spell her name. But with Rupi Kaur, I believe like her Milk and Honey book, or wasn't it about like something, some sort of like trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like sexual stuff.
Yes. Yes. And there, I believe there was some like childhood trauma and sexual abuse.
Yeah. Like with that, I can
Yes.
understand. I think that vulnerability and knowing like this is this is the context in which these poems were created, and this is the subject matter of these poems. I think that creates a level of trust. And honestly,
Yeah.
for stuff like that, I feel like you can justify the length of the poems being quite
Yeah.
short, because then I think sometimes with short poems, the weight of each word becomes so much heavier. And it
Yeah.
also it kind of welcomes in a different, maybe a different sort of analytical lens than something like the Wasteland would, where
Right.
the context of like within the greater piece is so important, and
Yeah.
different like historical references and whatnot. But maybe with a
Totally.
short poem about like a really heavy topic, where it's almost like this is as much as I can say about this, and I can't say anymore
Yeah.
because it's too heavy. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan either, but I
But
think
it's,
it can be justified. I think a
I
short
agree.
poem for certain things works better than a longer poem would.
Yeah.